Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Modern and Medieval Languages Subject Admissions webinar by Downing College. My name is Catriona and I'm the School Liaison Officer at Downing, and I've organised today's webinar for you. So why are we running this webinar? We're running a series of subject webinars to help students to understand more about the admissions process and also the details of the course. So hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you'll know a lot more about the MML course at Cambridge and whether it is suitable for you. And if you are interested in applying, you'll know how to apply and do the best that you can in the admissions process. So the timetable then for today's webinar, after my introduction, I'm going to hand over to our admissions tutor, Dr. Cameron Eunice, and he's going to go over the admissions process. Then he's going to hand over to Dr. Ian James, who's a Director of Studies for MML at Downing, and he's going to give you a subject overview. And then finally, we're going to hand over to Alex, who's a fourth year MML student at Downing, and she's going to talk more about life as an MML student at Downing and at Cambridge. So a couple of things to remember, we are recording this session, so please do not worry if you miss anything, and we will send you the link in the next few days to watch it. And we're going to try and answer as many of the questions as we can in a Q&A at the end with all the speakers. Please can I ask you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen rather than the chat box, as that just helps us to keep track of the questions. So what is Downing College? Well, you can see a picture of our site here in the centre of Cambridge, and we're one of the 31 Cambridge colleges that make up the University of Cambridge. We were founded in 1800 and we're the 17th college to be founded out of those 31. We have around 450 undergraduate students and around 120 new students joining Downing each year. And that is for all subjects taught at the University of Cambridge. And importantly for today, that includes MML. I'm now going to hand over to our admissions tutor, who's going to talk you through the application process.
Many thanks for that, Catriona. Hopefully everyone can see my slides. As Catriona mentioned, my name is Cameron Eunice. I'm the admissions tutor at Downing College. And what I'd like to do this afternoon is go over a few areas in my talk. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the roles of the departments and colleges within the University of Cambridge. When I first started my job, my career at Cambridge, one of the things I found quite difficult to get to grasp with is how do the departments work and how do the colleges work in synergy with them. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time telling you a little bit about what the departments offer to students and how the colleges work in synergy with those to support students whilst they are studying at the university. I'm then going to touch on a little bit about the admissions process, just kind of highlight the key steps involved in preparing your application to the University of Cambridge, and really trying to emphasize the key deadlines that you need to think about when you are preparing your application. I'll tell you a little bit about the admissions assessment, and for MML, there is an at-interview assessment that all candidates have to sit. So I'll be telling you a little bit about that. And then hopefully at the end, talk a little bit about how to prepare a personal statement, give you some good tips and guidelines on what to think about when writing a personal statement, and give you some general guidelines on what to expect if you are invited for an interview at the university for undergraduate admissions. So a little bit about the university. If you become an undergraduate student at the university, you are a member of the university and the department that you're studying at, as well as a college. Now, what does the departments offer in terms of services and content for students when they're studying here? So they're here to set the course content. So they will provide you the syllabus document for your undergraduate course that you're going to be studying. They also provide all the teaching for the undergraduate course. So all your lectures, seminars, any kind of assessed works that you have to do. It could be sort of project work, it could be assessments. They're all carried out within the department. They also set the exam papers for the courses and mark your exam scripts and award your degrees. So the department's there basically to provide the whole academic course for the students. And they're also to provide advice to students after they graduate about the prospects to have in different careers as well. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what the departments do and how they work and what sort of things to expect when you come to the university and visit the department for your undergraduate studies. Now, how does the college work in synergy? Well, they actually provide a series of different sorts of sort of facilities and services to students whilst they're studying here as an undergraduate. But before you actually come to Cambridge and start your studies, one of the key things that the colleges are involved in is the undergraduate admissions. So when you actually apply to the university, your application is actually reviewed by the college that you've chosen to apply to. They then carry out the selection process and admit the student to the university. And once the student is admitted, they then provide a series of different services for the students whilst they're here studying for the undergraduate. One of the key things that colleges will offer is academic and pastoral care. So when you first arrive to Cambridge as an undergraduate, one of the first things you will realize is, and told about, is that you have been assigned a director of studies. And what the director of studies is there to do is provide support and advice to students throughout their time whilst they're studying their undergraduate. They're actually there as a mentor to oversee your academic work and to make sure that you're on track and that you are keeping up with your workload throughout your time while you're studying here at the university. As well as that, you're also assigned a personal tutor. And what a personal tutor is there is to provide pastoral care for students. So to give you an example, if you're studying at the university and if you run into unforeseen financial difficulties, a tutor's there to make sure that they can support the student and give them advice about what sort of bursaries and hardship funds are available to support them with their financial needs. And in some cases, actually apply for the funding for you on your behalf as well. Another example of what a tutor can do, if you run into and sort of unforced any kind of medical sort of condition, if you become unwell whilst you're studying at the university, you might actually find that this is impacting your studies and your ability to perform at your best in your exams. And that's again where the tutor comes into its elements, where it can actually support the student and make sure they can liaise closely with the departments and faculties to make sure that there are the relevant sort of examination allowances put in place for the students to support them with their learning needs. So these are the key roles of a tutor, and each student is assigned their own personal tutor. As well as that, there's also, every college will have a college nurse, which is there to provide medical advice to any students, and are there available to come and talk to throughout the week, and normally have walk-in clinics that they arrange within the college for students to come and attend. And one other thing you'll find at every college, there is a chapel and there is a chaplain at each college. And again, the chaplain's role is there to help sort of bring the student community together and to provide general care and support for students and advice for students whilst they're studying here at the university. What we have at Downing is our chaplain organises every Thursday a sort of a Keith's Cafe, and that's an opportunity for undergraduate students to get together in the college grounds, have a hot cup of coffee or hot chocolate with a donut and catch up with fellow students. And it's quite a sociable event, and it allows to build a student community within the college. So those are the sorts of academic and pastoral care that the colleges provide to students whilst they're studying here. As well as that, the colleges are responsible for providing all the accommodation, all the dining facilities, and any kind of recreation facilities that students want to have access to whilst they're studying at the university. So if you look at any of the college websites, you would see there's a whole range of accommodations that the colleges provide. There's a whole range of sort of catering services they also provide, as well as a whole vast range of sports facilities that are available for students. Now, as well as this, the college also provides some teaching support, and they organize a lot of small group teaching classes for students, and they are known as supervisions. And what these supervisions are primarily aimed at doing is supporting students in what they have learnt so far at the faculties through the lectures. So Typically, you will be getting together with an academic within the college, and they'll be getting together with you in small groups of maybe 2 or 3 students, and in some cases individually, to go over some of the content that you have covered in the department in your lectures, and to make sure that you've understood the material that's been taught to you, and actually then question and go through more problem sheets, maybe some past papers, maybe some set essay work, and give you feedback on where you could improve on your writing skills or answering the questions that you've been attempting through supervisions. Lastly, colleges also provide a whole range of academic study spaces, facilities. So every college will have a library, have got quiet spaces and study spaces around the college facilities for students to use. At Downing, we have a library which is in normal times when there's not a pandemic, is normally open for students 24 hours a day throughout term to have access to. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what the department's role is and how the colleges work in synergy with that. I'm going to move on and now talk a little bit about the application process. In this slide, what I'm trying to highlight is there's a number of key steps that you need to think about when preparing your application. One of the key things I always advise any candidate preparing their application is to really think about the course that they're applying to think about what is it you're interested in studying higher education, and explore the range of courses available at the university which would fit your interests. So Cambridge offer over 30 courses and which cover a broad range of 65 different subjects across the university. So please do look at what is it you're interested in. In the case of MML, you can just do MML as a subject area, or you can combine it with subjects such as history as well. So again, make sure you read around the subject you're interested in, make sure it fits your interests and what is it you want to pursue at higher education. The other thing you need to think about when preparing your application is think about the college you wish to apply to. Now, a number of students ask me what sort of things they need to worry about or think about when choosing a college. And my advice to anyone who's preparing their application is to really have your own checklist of the key things you want the college to have, which are important to you. At the end of the day, you're going to be spending 3 to 4 years of your academic studies living in that college, and you need to make sure it's the right fit for you. So your checklist could be location, it could be accommodation, it could be catering facilities, it could be the sports facilities that the college has on offer. So do spend some time, visit all the college websites, read about them. There's lots of resources available on all the college websites, and find out more about the college that you might be interested in applying to. At the same time, many applicants don't want to have the stress of thinking about which college they have to apply to and don't want to have to worry about this, in which case you can just submit an open application. And what happens in that scenario is your application is randomly allocated to a college, and then they review your application for the admissions process from there on. As well as that, it's really important to check any kind of deadlines or registration deadlines that you need to meet. Now, in the case of MML, there are no pre-admissions assessments, so there's no requirements for registration deadlines. However, if there are anything like that that come up, the university will be making some announcements to inform candidates about this. The other thing you need to think about is a UCAS application deadline. This is much more earlier than other universities, and the deadline is set as the 15th of October. So please do make sure that you have your application prepared and ready to submit way before that deadline. Once we receive your application, you will be contacted by the university to complete an additional questionnaire. Now, many students get quite stressed about this, think this is another form of assessment. I'd just like to reassure everyone that this is really the university trying to gather further information about you. So sort of things that will be asked in an additional questionnaire is what sort of topics you've covered so far in your A-level subjects that you're studying so far at school. And really what that does is allows us to gives us another layer of information that interviewers could then have to hand and then base their interview questions on subjects that you've already learnt around and build on those sort of topics within the interview. Other examples are, you might want to talk about some extenuating circumstances and let the university know about those. And in the additional questionnaire, this is an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit more about those and tell us why that's impacted your studies. As well as that, depending on the college you apply to, you may be required to submit some written work. And this really is an essay that you've already done at school and has been marked by your teachers. Again, the requirements for this are available on all the college websites. And once you've submitted your application, if you're not too sure about what's required in terms of submitted work, you can contact the college and they should be able to advise and guide you on that. Now, once we've received your application and we've been able to review your submitted work and all the additional information you provided us, we then make a decision about who we'd like to invite for an interview. And normally, by the end of November, we will be sending out invitation letters to candidates, informing them whether they've been selected for an interview and to give them information about when those interviews are going to be taking place. Now, the interviews normally take place within the first 2 weeks of December, and I'll be telling a little bit more about what to expect at an interview a bit later on in my talk. But once the interviews have been done, we then normally make our decisions in early January, and all candidates will be finding out about the outcome of their application around the middle of January at the latest. So hopefully this provides you all the sort of key stages involved in the application process and what to expect at various stages along the application process, and key deadlines and timelines about the process as well. So moving on to talk a little about what sort of information do we use to assess your application. Now, a lot of people have a different sort of perceptions about the various parts of the application and the importance of it. I'd just like to highlight that we look at all the various information when we review applications. So we look at your academic track record so far. How have you done so far in your studies? What sort of grades have you achieved, for example, in your GCSEs? We'll also be looking at your personal statement and looking at what are the key reasons why you're interested in applying for the subject that you've chosen to apply to. We'll also be looking at your teacher's reference to see what sort of things they have to say about you and talk about what sort of academic qualities you have. We'll also be looking at any kind of tests you sat there and review the scores and how well you performed in those tests, and really comparing those against the gathered field which is applied to the university. We'll also be reviewing any of your written work that you submitted and be able to review your writing skills and be able to assess you based on those sorts of skills. As well as that, we'll be looking at any kind of extenuating circumstances that you've told us about and how that's impacted your studies so far, so that can be taken into account when reviewing your application. And finally, we will be looking at how you performed at the interview. Now, no one of these aspects are considered in isolation. We look at all these aspects together holistically and review every application on an individual basis before making a decision about whether we would like to make you an offer or not. So what are we looking for when we are reviewing applications? Well, the key thing I can't emphasize here enough is that we're only interested in academic ability and potential. So we want to make sure that the candidates which we select to study the courses are ones which can keep up with the academic workload. Cambridge has very short terms, they're only 8 weeks long, and the actual academic workload is quite intense. So we need to make sure that the students which actually come to study at the university are those which can keep up with that workload. We want to make sure that you meet the subject requirements and make sure that you are suitable for the chosen course. And the key thing is we want to make sure that there is a genuine interest in the subject that you've applied to as well. The things that we're not really interested in is any kind of extracurricular activities you do. So if you play, my example every time I do this talk is if you play for the under-18 football team, England squad, that's absolutely amazing, but has no relevance to your application. Your school or your background has no relevance to your application. We are purely reviewing your application on academic ability and potential, and that is our key selection criteria when we are reviewing applications. So in terms of the standard conditional offer, For MML, it's an A star and 2 A's if you're doing A levels. You need to make sure that at least one of your A levels is the subject, is the language that you want to study at higher education as well. If you are studying IB, we'd expect you to achieve an overall score of 41 to 43, and your higher level subjects should include a language as well. If you are doing some other types of qualifications, there's plenty of information available on the university website. Please do both visit this link here, and you should be able to find out the relevant qualifications you're doing and what are the requirements for those qualifications. If for any reason you're unsure, just get in touch with the college you wish to apply to and discuss your particular circumstances, and they should be able to advise you on whether you meet the entry requirements for MML. Now, a little bit about personal statements. This is quite an important part of your application. This is really where you get your first opportunity to present yourself as an individual to the university. The personal statement needs to be around about 500 to 600 words. And the key thing is it should include evidence about your academic ability and potential. It should demonstrate and reflect the motivation and suitability of your chosen course. And really, we need to see some evidence of commitment and self-discipline when we read through your personal statement. A number of students ask on how to go about preparing a personal statement, what sort of things they can be doing. There's plenty of supercurricular activities available for students to look at. There's lots of resources available online. The university also has some very good resources and links that they refer you to if you are thinking about taking up some supercurricular activities. The key thing is really to read around your subject area, to build up a broader context around the topic that you're interested in when you are, or what you want to pursue at a university level. So these are just some examples of different types of resources available. But again, do talk to your schools and do get in touch with the college that you're interested in applying to if you want some further advice about supercurricular activities. Now, in summary, a successful personal statement is really one which gives specific evidence and examples of area interests and achievements. So to give you that some more context about what I'm trying to say here, you may have read a lot of literature around your subject area. And then sometimes when you read through personal statements, you see that candidates list a series of literature that they've read, which is absolutely great to see that you've really read around your subject area. However, it's far more informative if you were to pick out one or two of those references and talk about them in more detail. Talk about the impact it's had on you, talk about what you've learned from that experience, and really talk about how that has led to your decision about applying for that subject area at university level. So really, you need to show that you have thought about and researched the course that beyond your school curriculum, and really have reflected on why you want to study at university level that subject. Now, some other general advice: your personal statement should be 2/3 of it should be subject-based, talking about the topic you want to study at university, the course you want to pursue at higher education. And at the end, you should allow some time to talk about some of your general interests and hobbies as well. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas and tips about personal statements. I'm now going to talk a little bit about the interview process. As I mentioned, if you are selected for an interview, you will be hearing from the college by the end of November, most likely, and the interviews normally take place in early December. Normally the interviews, on the day of your interview, you will have 2 interviews. Each one will be around 20 to 30 minutes long. And you'll be interviewed by 2 academics at each interview, and they'll be predominantly asking you questions around academic discussion and subject-based discussion. So if you wanted to look at some examples of some of the interviews, there's lots of resources available on the university YouTube channel, and some good examples of some typical interviews which you can watch, which show what sort of things happen in an interview on these YouTube videos. So please do look at those if you do get a moment. I definitely encourage students to look at those videos. What sort of things to expect at an interview? It could be a number of things. It could be discussing some recent academic work. So you may have submitted an essay as part of your application. The interviewer may decide to pick up one of your essays and have a more detailed discussion about your essay and talk through it with you and really sort of discuss the topic in more detail with you. They may pick out something from your personal statement. You may have mentioned something about reading around a certain piece of literature. They may want to discuss that in more detail with you and really sort of reflect on your understanding from what you've read around. The whole idea really is to present you with scenarios or questions and really see how what you've understood from them and how you've reflected from your understanding from them and what sort of interpretations you've come taken back from the reading around those subject areas. In an interview, I always advise candidates, it's not about answering the question as fast as possible. What we're really looking for is the thought process that you apply in trying to work your way through a discussion or an argument. So key bits of advice: think out loud, ask questions if you're not sure about anything, and it's really a discussion. It's sort of like basically a simulation of what a typical supervision would be at Cambridge. We really want to see how teachable you are, and if we give you key bits of information, can you put that together to work up an argument or present a solution to the question that's been presented to you. So hopefully this gives you an idea about the application process and what sort of things to expect at an interview and how to go about preparing a personal statement. Just going to finish on this slide to talk about some typical frequently asked questions. One of the key things lots of students ask is about gap years. Is it possible to take a gap year? That's absolutely fine. Many applicants do want to take a gap year. And if you would like to do that, that's not a problem. What I will always encourage applicants to do is to kind of stipulate that they are applying for a deferred entry if you are planning to take a gap year. And if you are on a gap year, do spend some time during that gap year doing some activities which will be related to the subject that you were studying at university to try and reinforce your understanding around the subject, but also keeping the topic alive in your thoughts and in your mind. Last but not least, I've talked a little bit about extenuating circumstances. I really just wanted to emphasize this again. If there are any circumstances which have disrupted your work, it could be health issues, it could have been a bereavement, please do tell us about this. We want to make sure that we take into consideration any kind of extenuating circumstances when reviewing applications. Okay, so I'm at the end of my talk. If you do have any questions, please do post them on the Q&A. I'm going to hand over to Ian now, who's going to tell you a little bit more about MML.
Well, hello everybody. I assume everyone can hear me and see me. Welcome to this seminar. My name is Ian James, and I direct studies in modern and medieval languages at Downing College. And I'm also a member of the Department of French in the Faculty of Modern and Medieval Languages and Linguistics. So I'm going to separate my talk today out into 4 principal segments. I'm going to talk initially and generally about what the Modern Languages degree has to offer overall. And then I'll talk a little bit about the degree structure and the specifics of that structure. I will also talk about the specifics of college teaching in modern languages and what you can expect from modern languages at Downing specifically. And then I will finish my comments talking about admissions and give a few comments about what we're looking for from our MML applicants, and particularly the process of applications and what you can expect from interviews and things like that. So I'll begin overall by talking about the Modern Languages degree. If you are admitted to take the Modern and Medieval Languages degree at Cambridge, you begin with 2 languages, one of which must be post A-level. The other, second language, can be taken in what we call an ab initio mode. So you can start a language from scratch. So if you've only got 1 A-level in a language or IB equivalent, then you can take up another language and be a beginner in that. But we do, as part of the degree structure, require you to begin with 2 languages. Now, by the end of the degree, what you will have is a very, very high level of competence in both the speaking, the reading, and the writing of your chosen European languages. And that will be combined with a very highly developed knowledge of the culture of that language in various ways. We always emphasize the fact that you can't really separate out the idea of culture from the language which supports that culture. So I will be talking about the way our degree separates out language teaching and what we call subject area teaching, but that separation is in many ways artificial. The two sides flow into each other and they support each other. So do bear that in mind as I go on. Our faculty has a number of sections devoted to what one might call some of the main and principal European languages. So we have a French section, and that's where I work, a German section, a Spanish and Portuguese section, an Italian section, and a Slavonic section. So these sections cater for the principal languages that you might choose to do at Cambridge in the Modern Languages degree. And you can choose any combination you wish. So you could do French with Spanish, German with Spanish, Italian with Russian, and so on and so forth. Within these areas, there are other European languages that are catered for, but not at the level of degree. So for instance, there are courses in the Spanish section on Catalan, if you might be interested in Catalan culture. We also offer courses in Polish and Ukrainian. So what you can expect is to take your language level to a very, very high point of advancement by the end of the degree. And certainly what this does is open lots of doors. Modern Languages graduates from Cambridge go into all walks of life. They subsequently might do a master's to develop another area of academic interest that might put them into a specific area. The Modern Languages degree is a humanities degree which teaches you about the culture of a specific country, gets your language up to a very high level, and will set you up for all sorts of possibilities once you graduated. I would say the degree opens many, many doors of different kinds, and it closes very, very few. So if you're interested in European cultures and in travel and in living abroad and potentially working with other languages abroad, this is certainly a very attractive degree program. I'll talk a little bit now about the degree structure before I go on to talk about the content. The degree is split into two parts. These are parts 1, which is divided into A and B, that's the first and the second year, and part 2, which is the final 2 years, which comprises a year abroad in one of the countries of the languages you're studying, and a final year where you prepare for your finals examinations. So it is a 4-year degree. Now, as the admissions tutor just mentioned, we also offer in parallel a joint degree structure where you actually only take one language. This would be generally a post-A-level language, but it doesn't have to be, and you combine that with history. I would be happy in the Q&A afterwards, certainly, to answer any specific questions about the joint degree program with history. It is a separate program and a separate degree in and of itself. So looking at the Modern Languages degree and its 2-part structure, 1A, 1B, in one part and part 2 in the second part, I think it's safe to say that at the beginning of the degree, that is in the first 2 years in part 1, there is much more emphasis on language learning. If our aim is to allow you to develop your language skills in both languages, and then finally, as you will see, in one language in particular at the end of the degree, to a very high level, then we need to really, really work hard on the language early on in the degree. So as the degree goes along, what you will find is that the emphasis shifts gradually from a primary focus on language learning to later in the degree, more and more papers and courses devoted to culture, what we call subject papers or scheduled papers. And I'll talk more about those in a moment. So in the first year, you will have in the faculty quite a number of contact hours, and these are around language classes. So most of the language learning you do takes place in the faculty. Although, as I will suggest later, there is some significant language learning that takes place in the college. But in the first year, in a post-A-level subject, you have two principal language classes in your post-A-level subject. One is focused around active writing, and the other one is focused on translation. And these language classes happen in groups of between 10 and 13. And you would find yourself in the faculty with students from other colleges. So they're a great way of actually getting to know people and work alongside people who are doing modern languages, but who aren't actually at your college. And certainly the writing class is immersive. It's about writing in French, and it's conducted in French. So you will find in that side of the teaching, at least, that you're thoroughly immersed from the outset in the modern language that you're wishing to take. These two classes are also supplemented by oral classes. So we spend a lot of time in the first year helping you practice with your spoken language, as well as your writing skills, and as well as your reading and comprehension skills. Now, if you're doing a subject ab initio from scratch, say you've done A-level German, and so you do all the post-A-level German classes, as I've just described, you would also be doing a range of classes in another language, which those classes are more numerous, and they really try and get you within the space of a year up to A-level standard in that language. So you can imagine if you do opt to do a language from scratch, post-A-level, sorry, not post-A-level, as beginners, these are very intensive courses. Now, if you've, say, done A-level Spanish, doing a beginner's course in Portuguese is likely to be challenging, certainly, but eminently doable. If you have done, say, a Romance language like French or Spanish, and you start Russian from scratch, this is a greater challenge. And so if you decide that you want to do an ab initio language, you should really take advice from people in college or in the faculty about the pace and structure of the course. They are very intensive, and consider whether that kind of speed learning of a language is really for you. But these are very, very rewarding. And certainly if people who do a beginner's language in their first year decide to specialize in that language in their final year, they often do better than people who started their languages post A-level in the first year. So you have freedom to decide whether you want to do two post A-level languages if you have two languages at A-level, or whether you want to do something from scratch. If you do an ab initio language, then in your second year you will follow the post A-level course that post A-level students follow in their first year. Either way, for the first 2 years of the degree, you are focusing a lot on language and steadily building the other side of the degree. And the other side of the degree is, as I said earlier, subject-based papers. And at Cambridge, at least, these are very wide-ranging. We certainly teach literary culture and the literature of the countries whose language you may be studying, and across a wide range of periods. So we are the Faculty of Modern and Medieval Languages and Linguistics. And so we teach content from the medieval period onwards. So if you're interested in the historical dimension of the countries that you're studying, you certainly have an opportunity to study from the medieval period onwards. But the degree is by no means and in any way limited to just literature. We are, as a faculty, the Faculty of Modern and Medieval Languages and Linguistics, And although we have a separate linguistics degree, which I won't be talking about today, you can actually do linguistics topics within your subject areas, French, German, Spanish, and so on. We have dedicated papers to linguistics, but we also teach film, we teach history and cultural history, we teach thought and general cultural topics. So you will find in the first year that on top of the language work you do, which takes up the bulk of your time, there is one introductory paper to the culture of the language you're studying. And if you're an ab initio student, you will do that in your second year. In the second year, when you are either doing one post-A-level language and your ab initio, or two post-A-level languages, you begin to have a wider range of cultural topics to choose from. As I've said, this can involve literature and culture papers from across the various periods. It also involves papers that are more history and thought or philosophy oriented, and also linguistics papers. So we hope, as I suggested earlier, that these scheduled or content papers marry very well and flow into the language papers, just as the language papers will give you linguistic skills that help you understand and engage with the culture of the countries concerned. After having specialized in language in the first year in writing skills and comprehension skills and translation, we also do quite a bit of audio-visual work in the second year. And we offer courses that will prepare you for part 2 of the degree and your third year, when you will be spending your year abroad in one of the countries of the languages you are studying. Now, I'm of course very happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the course structure, so do by all means put them in the Q&A. I'll talk a little bit about the part 2 of the degree. In the final year, the emphasis is much more on content-based papers, and you have a very, very wide range to choose from. You can also borrow papers from other degree programs. So if you want to sort of spread your wings, the final year of the degree is a time when you can do that. You can specialize in film and cinematic culture. You can specialize in linguistics, literature, historical papers. Modern Languages at Cambridge is a truly multi and interdisciplinary faculty, which is why I think it's such a strong degree for preparing people for different avenues of development after they've graduated. The language component in the final year, nevertheless, is very, very advanced. And by this stage, you have decided to focus on one of your 2 languages, and you will have spent the bulk of your year abroad in the country where that language is spoken. So in the final year of the degree, we have writing papers which allow you to develop your writing skills to a very high level indeed. You get to write in the language at a high discursive register, a technical register, and develop your language skills to the extent that you can do pretty much whatever you like in that language and be confident in doing so. After the year abroad as well, we will expect you to be near fluent, if not fluent, in the spoken language. We also have a final year translation paper, which develops translation skills to a very high degree. And as I said, a wide range of content papers so that you can explore your interests, develop them, and tailor them to your own sense of what you want to be focusing on. The year abroad happens in year 3. You can, if you wish, split it between your 2 languages, but we require you to spend 8 months in a country which you'll be specializing in the final year of the degree. So if people do split their time abroad, we usually advise them to spend, say, 8 months in one country and up to 4 months in another, but people often spend 12 months in just one country. And people do all sorts of things in their year abroad. They get jobs in office environments or similar. They can follow university courses. They can also work in schools as language teaching assistants of the kind I imagine you're no doubt familiar with already. So I can answer any further questions you might have about the year abroad, of course. Okay, so that's the structure of the degree. You will find as the degree goes on that you're spending a lot of time in the faculty attending large lectures, language classes, and possibly seminars, depending on the subject that you're following. But all through the degree as well, you will be having small group teaching. Often small group teaching is exactly as our admissions tutor said earlier, to supplement and support the lectures that are being taught in the faculty. But this is the area where you develop essay writing skills. The small group teaching, which we call supervisions in a Cambridge college, usually involves 2 to 3 students, a teacher, a supervisor or fellow, and is organised around close focus on some of the texts which might have been mentioned in lectures in the faculty, but also writing essays about these texts. And one of the things that I think is a real strength of the Cambridge college teaching education is that you tend to write many, many essays and you get regular feedback on those essays. So within this very privileged form of teaching, you get to have very, very close contact with your teachers, regular feedback, and you get to develop your writing and discursive skills to a very high degree with a lot of input and attention from your teachers. And I think that's one of the real privileges that you have. You get time with your teachers in these small groups, and they are attending to you and focusing on you and helping you develop your academic skills, trajectory, and your intellectual interests. So a lot of these small group teaching colleges are essay-based. We also, certainly in some languages, French, my own language, we have a lot of oral classes, French speaking classes based at the college level. For some of the smaller languages like Italian or Slavonic, those oral classes happen in the faculty. It has to be said that because the different sections, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and so on, are different sizes, that the division between college teaching and faculty teaching can vary across the languages. But what you can be sure of is that at Downing, we accept people to take modern languages, taking any combination of the languages we offer. We don't sort of favour people doing one language over another. We welcome all the combinations, and we provide teaching equally for all the combinations that you can choose to do. And we're very keen to keep our intake of modern languages students diverse in terms of the languages we teach. Okay, so I will close by talking a little bit about our admissions process. To repeat some of the comments that Dr. Yunus said earlier about what we are looking for, it's as true for modern languages as it is for any other subject, that we are looking for people who have a genuine and developed interest in the subject area, who have potential for developing in the subject area. And so that means not just language ability, an ability to learn a foreign language, but an ability and an interest in the intellectual content of the degree and a potential to develop with that intellectual content across the full 4 years of the degree. And bearing in mind that by the end of the MML degree, the focus is lesser on language, because we assume that you've acquired very high level of language skills, and is more on areas of content relating to the culture, history, and linguistics of the languages that you will be studying. So really what we're looking for is genuine interest and commitment to the subject. And for people who will be able to demonstrate clearly that they have that interest and that they have that potential. And that really does, play a second role to what your other non-academic interests might be. As our admissions tutor said, what school you come from, what background you come from. We're really looking for commitment to our programme and an interest in our programme. And this is reflected in our assessments. One of the key things that was said earlier, I need to reiterate, our degree is intensive, our terms are short. we need to select people who we think are going to be able to keep up. Very intensive language courses, a lot of reading-based subject content courses. You really are, in a modern languages degree, asked to do many, many things at once and demonstrate different skills at once. So we're looking for people who will be able to cope with that. But it doesn't mean necessarily at the outset that we automatically look for people who are outstanding in language, or people who are outstanding in their interest in French cinema or German cinema. We're looking for a balance and a sense of how you will develop over the degree. Sometimes we admit people who perhaps need a bit more work on their language, perhaps for one reason or another, the language isn't as strong as it should be, but they show fantastic potential for the other side of the degree. Sometimes, you know, we will admit someone who we know that they will do very well in various areas, and so that's why we want to take them. So we do take a very balanced and all-round approach to the way we admit students, and we're not looking for any one thing, but for potential for the degree as a whole. So I would reiterate everything our admissions tutor said about your personal statements. Make sure that you cite specific areas of interest, and if you do cite something specific that you've read or that you're interested in, make sure that you come ready to talk about that in the interview. Anything specific that you mention in your personal statement, you will almost certainly be asked about at the interview. Prior to that though, prior to the interview, we do ask you to submit schoolwork, some of which will be in the language, but we also ask you to perhaps write essays in English or to submit essays that you might have written in English, either for your A-level or IB language course or for other courses you might be following. So we will look at schoolwork. We will also give you a test on the day. Now, when I've finished speaking, I will place into the chat function a link to some sample papers, some specimen papers for this test. Basically, the test is a passage in English. It takes an hour to sit. You read the passage in English and you are asked to answer a number of questions in a post A-level language of your choosing. So if you have A-level or IB Italian and Spanish, you can choose whether to write your answers on this English passage in Spanish or Italian. If you have only one language at A-level or IB, then you write in that language. So that test takes about an hour, and we look at that alongside the submitted schoolwork, your academic record, and your performance at interview. For the interview, we follow a fairly set procedure across the colleges. If you have 2 interviews, one for each language you are applying for. If it's a post A-level language, we will usually, just before the interview, give you a text in that language. And the opening of the interview, you'll be asked to read out loud from that text and in the language to talk about it. We'll ask you various questions. And that speaking in the language is what kicks off a post A-level interview and lasts for 5 to 10 minutes. We then, for the rest of the interview, ask you about your A-level work or your IB work and your general interests in the language. And what I would say as a word of advice is try and prepare for an interview in modern languages by focusing not just on your A-level work, but also more broadly on your commitment and interest to the language and the culture of that language. So we would expect successful applicants to perhaps have read stuff that is not on their A-level syllabus. This needn't be literary text. It can be any kind of material relating to the language and to the culture. It can be cinema, it can be news, it can be politics. We really want to see evidence of one kind or another that you're genuinely interested in the language and the culture of that language. And that's what the interview will be probing. If you are being interviewed for an ab initio language, maybe if you have GCSE in that language, some people do, and they go onto the ab initio course, we might test your language a little bit, but we will assume that you don't know the language. But one thing we will be testing for in these interviews, as well as in the post A-level and IB interviews, is linguistic competency. We need to admit people who have a feel for language learning, who understand language in terms of its structure and syntax, and have an interest in, if you like, the stuff of language. Because if you don't have that interest, you probably won't enjoy the degree. And what we want is to admit people who will both enjoy the degree and make the most of it. We will also ask you if you have any questions at the end of the interview. You must never feel obliged to have questions. If you don't have questions, that's because you have all the information you need, and that's very good. But we don't like people to go away with questions. And also, if there's something at the end of the interview that you wanted to talk about that you haven't talked about, certainly we will, at Downing at least, encourage you to talk about things, again, so that you don't go away thinking, oh, I wished I'd talked about that. So the main thing I would want to emphasize about admissions in MML at Downing is that, yes, it's a demanding process. If you're called to interview, it will no doubt be a nerve-wracking process, but it's really an opportunity for you to express an interest in the course, to show us what that interest is, and to allow you to tell us about yourselves. And we try to keep our interviews very, very friendly. We understand it can be a stressful situation, but we are very much an open community in Downing Modern Languages, as the Downing community is as a whole. So you can be sure that if you come to visit us for interview, or if you do an interview online, we will try and make it as stress-free as possible. Okay, so I think I've said as much as I want to now. I assume that we will take all the various Q&As at the end. I will now hand over to Alex Feiss, who, as was said earlier, is in her final year at MML. Alex is one of our star students, and I'm very pleased that she's here today to talk to you. Alex, if you think I've missed anything in my talk, do please fill in the gaps. Over to you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to talk a bit about student life and kind of give you my honest opinion about the course. It's very positive. I've really enjoyed my time. Like Ian says, I'm in my 4th year and I'm specialising in Italian, which means that I'm only studying Italian language papers at the moment. But in my 1st year, I studied Italian ab initio and Spanish post A-level. So I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about some of the preconceptions that you might have about Cambridge, and that I know I had before coming to university. And I think the main one is that the workload is enormous and that you will be expected to work all the time. You won't have much of a social life or time to do extracurriculars. And I can say to you that this is just not the case. You will have time to do extracurriculars. You'll have a very rich social life, but the workload is still very big. And as Ian and Cam have said, it is intense. The term is about 8 weeks long, and in that time you're having to produce a lot of work, and at the same time you're doing extracurriculars if you choose to join societies or have other interests you want to pursue. So in that sense it's very intense, but do bear in mind that you have longer holidays because the term is shorter, so there is time to rest at the end of that, so it's like a short intense burst. Another concern, a very minor concern that I had, was that the nightlife wouldn't be very good because Cambridge is quite a small city, you know, compared to London or Manchester or Leeds. And of course this is an important part of student life, but what I will say is that Cambridge has a very rich nightlife. You have lots of bars and pubs in the city centre. There's great theatre, so lots of theatre venues with student performances or comedy nights, and there are a few small clubs, small but great fun, So definitely don't worry about that. You will have a very full student experience. And so a bit about MML. So from my perspective, why should you study MML at Cambridge? Like Ian has said, it's a very varied course with lots of different elements. So you have the language element, and again, like Ian said, you can study lots of languages in your time at Cambridge. So you start off with 2, you can choose to continue to study 2 through to the end of your time. So in your 4th year, you can continue studying the languages you started with, or you can pick some more up along the way, or like me, you can specialise. So that is up to you. You'll also be studying translation, cultural studies, as has been discussed, and you have the flexibility to choose what you study and what you specialise in. So I've got an interest in film and have chosen to do my dissertation in film topics and to take a film paper in my final year. Another thing that is good about the course at Cambridge is that we do our year abroad in 3rd year. I believe that there are some courses that do the year abroad in 2nd year, but I think doing it in your 3rd year, it just gives you more time to consolidate your languages in 1st and 2nd year, so that you can go into your year abroad feeling really confident in your language ability. And I've got a few other reasons why MML at Cambridge is good, but those for me are the main reasons. And I thought I'd just give you an example day in the life of an MML student. So typically I'll wake up at 8 o'clock and head off to Sidgwick site for a 9 a.m. lecture. So Sidgwick is where all the humanities subjects, or most of the humanities subjects, have their teaching. So lectures and other teaching classes, translation classes, for example, are held at Sidgwick. After my lecture, I might get a coffee with some friends in the cafe at Sidgwick site, and then go to the library for a couple of hours. I'll be taking out books for my next supervision essay, spending some time on class assignments. So, for example, doing a translation from Spanish into English. And then at 12:30, I'll get some lunch. And at 1 o'clock, I'll have a language class. For example, going to my Italian ab initio class in 1st year and covering present tense, future tense, or prepositions, the basics. Or if it was a Spanish language class, I'd be looking kind of at more nuanced grammar topics. So just to give you an idea of what we'd be looking at in these classes. Then at 2 o'clock, I might meet up with my supervision partners and head off to our supervision together. Usually supervisions are held in colleges. So other colleges in Cambridge, it's not necessarily going to be your own college, but it's always like a nice opportunity to explore a new part of the university. And sometimes the supervisor, if they're feeling particularly nice, they might start off your supervision with a cup of coffee or tea that they can offer you. And then that's when you will go through feedback from your previous essay, which they will have set you, and discuss content from recent lectures. And it's just an opportunity to ask questions if you're uncertain of anything, or to kind of, delve a bit deeper and pursue your own individual interests, or ask for other reading advice, or make sure that you've understood everything really clearly. Basically, it's a very good opportunity to push your knowledge further. After my supervision, I'll probably cycle back to Downing, have a cup of tea, and then carry on working on assignments until dinner. And then in my 1st year, I went to Hull for dinner a lot with friends, because it was quite a nice social activity to do. But there is the option to cook in your accommodation as well. But yeah, we have a lovely dining hall here, and the food is very, very good at Downing, I have to say. And so going to dinner in the hall is a really nice way to unwind at the end of the day. And then on a typical evening, I might head back to my room and do some more work. But on a Thursday, I have choir practice, because I sing Downing College Chapel Choir, and we rehearse on Thursdays and Sundays with evensong on Sunday after rehearsal. That's what I'd be doing on a Thursday evening typically, and after rehearsal we might go to the college bar as a choir and get to know each other a bit better and relax after rehearsal. Then I'll head back to my accommodation around 11 o'clock and wind down for bed. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the year abroad. This is a really exciting part of the MML degree because it's an opportunity for you to put your languages into practice and get experience living abroad, maybe even working abroad. So on my year abroad, I went to Milan for 4 months and I worked for the Italian National Trust. It's called FI, and I worked as a tour guide in a beautiful villa in the heart of Milan. And I also did a kind of part-time internship in their headquarters in the fundraising and development office. And I was doing kind of translation tasks there and got an insight into how the organization worked. And then after that, I went to Cuba to study at the University of Havana. That was going to be for about 7 months, but in the end it was more like 2.5 because the pandemic unfortunately brought that to an early end. But I still had a very good time while I was there and got to do a little bit of traveling, which was great fun. And what I would say about the year abroad is that because you're making a lot of the decisions, no one's telling you what to do. You have to be quite organized and proactive in making sure that it happens, that you're emailing people about opportunities and or applying to internships abroad. And that can take a bit of, good. You need to be quite good at your time management to make sure you can juggle that alongside your degree in second year. And for anyone who might be thinking about how they will fund the year abroad, your college very often can provide or has some travel grants on offer for kind of academic purposes. So the year abroad, it's definitely an academic, an example of where of academic travel, if that makes sense. So you can get that support from your college if you need it. So good to be aware of, I think. And then just thinking about extracurriculars you could be involved with, this is definitely a big part of your time at university. And I really encourage people to get involved with extracurriculars because they can be a really good way to kind of wind down and take some time away from your degree. And it can make you more productive in that sense because you're kind of, you'll enjoy your work more when you get back to it. So for example, you could be doing sports at a college level, and Downing is quite a big rowing college, but we also have football and rugby teams. Ultimate Frisbee is very popular here as well. Or if you're interested in student journalism, you could do a bit of that. Student media, filmmaking, music. I've talked a bit about choirs already, but there are also several orchestras you could join. And acting, that's also really popular. So lots of student productions that you can get involved with. And if you're interested in any other societies, there's a really big long list on the university website that you can look at. And if there's still a society that you'd like to join, but it doesn't exist yet, you can set it up. So there are just so many options of what you can be doing in your free time. So now, why should you choose Downing College? So I absolutely love Downing. It's a very beautiful place to be and to spend the 3 to 4 years of your degree. We have beautiful kind of neoclassical architecture, and it's a very big open space. And we have an area of grass called the paddock where we can play sports, which is really nice because not every Cambridge college has that space available. And there are, generally funny rules about not being able to walk on the grass and things like that. So it's really nice that we have that here. We also have a lovely bar and cafe where you can go and study or relax in the evening. We have a theatre, so there are some student productions held there throughout the year. We've got a lovely library, and we also have an art gallery called the Heon Gallery. So that's quite fun. We've had exhibitions there by, for example, Quentin Blake, who is an alumnus of the college, and he likes to kind of stay involved, which is really nice. Downing's also in a central location. We're really close to the centre of Cambridge here, but we are a little bit further out than some of the perhaps more famous colleges, the bigger colleges. And we're closer to the train station, which is just very convenient, and it does mean that we are less touristy here, and that is a plus. So a few other reasons why I think that you should pick Downing. We have excellent accommodation, and it's guaranteed for all 3 to 4 years of your undergraduate course, and that is not a guarantee in all colleges. So it's just really nice to have like no stress. You're not worrying in first year about finding a house in your second year to live in. That stress is just taken away, which is really great. And in terms of catering, you don't have to decide whether you will be self-catering or catered for, because all students have access to kitchens. But if ever you don't have any food in, you can just pop down to the hall, and you can buy some food there using your student card. So you're not having to commit to anything either way. And some other colleges do have kind of funny rules about how many times you have to eat in hall per term. So it's nice that we have that freedom. And then like I've mentioned before, we've got great sports facilities, the paddock, we have an on-site gym, we have Downing pitches, so lots of games fields just on the outskirts of the city. And we have Downing Boathouse, which is where you can learn to row. So that's down on the river. And just in general, Downing is definitely a very supportive community. We've got really friendly people, and there's lots of fun throughout the year. So I can go into that a little bit now. In addition to the kind of societies and sports that we have in Downing, we have a few kind of funny traditions that I think are they're kind of Cambridge traditions, to be honest, more than specifically Downing. But one of those is the college families system. And basically it's a way of matching up first year students with second year students who are doing the same subject as them. So in Freshers Week, you get assigned college siblings, so like 2 college siblings and then 2 college parents. And one of those college parents will do the same subject as you. So you can ask them all about your subject and how they found their first year. They can give you tips or advice. They can help you out with any questions you might have about the course or otherwise. And it's just a really nice way to very quickly kind of become immersed in the Downing community. And so in Freshers Week, you will normally go punting with your college family and then have a dinner with them as well as other college families. So like I say, it's a really great way of mixing quickly into the community. And then you also have themed formals, and formal halls are kind of fancy dinners that are held in the hall, where people kind of dress up in their gowns, their academic gowns. It's candlelight, 3-course meal, you go with your friends for birthdays, that kind of thing. And just have a really lovely evening. And sometimes they're themed. So for example, Halloween formal, where everyone goes like dressed up in a costume, which is quite good fun. And then at Christmas, we have lots of celebrations. So we have a Christmas dinner in the hall with a Christmas tree, you can see in the photos, a Christmas carol service sung by the choir. And we also have this tradition called Bridgemas, which is when we celebrate Christmas on the 25th of November, because basically, students go home for Christmas at the start of December. And in order to celebrate Christmas with their friends, we do it at the end of November. So it's a little bit strange, but it's always really good fun, and it's something that kind of keeps the spirits high towards the end of term. And then finally, at the end of the year, you have May Week and May Balls. So May Balls are essentially big parties that are held in colleges throughout Cambridge, and they last all through the night. You've got loads of food and drink, drink stands, entertainment. You might have fireworks, there's music, maybe fairground rides. Like it's just so much fun. Everyone dresses up really nice, and it's a fun way to end the year after lots of work, lots of exams. But yeah, you make lots of great memories throughout the year, not just at the end of the year. So yeah, lots to look forward to if you do come. And so some final advice, don't be put off by any concerns or worries that you might be having. I think that you should just apply. But what is really important is that you choose the right course for you. So do your research, try and figure out whether you want to do just MML or history with MML, or history of a language, or maybe even Middle Eastern languages, or East Asian languages. Think about that, maybe even compare to other courses that you might be interested in studying, because you don't want to get here and then realize that you'd rather be doing the course your friend's doing. So definitely do your research. And if possible, attend an open day, even if it's virtual this year. Speak to current students, ask questions in the chat now that I can answer, and take a look at Downing's website to see if you think that the college will be a good fit for you. So yeah, but just apply, and I hope this has been a good introduction to college life and student life at Cambridge.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to Cam, to Ian and to Alex for your presentations. It's been really, really useful to hear more about the MML course. We're now going to have the Q&A, and a lot of the questions have already been answered in the chat, which is brilliant. So please do go and have a look at the questions there and see them. And if there's any others you have, please do submit them and we'll go through them. But for the sake of the recording, I think I'm going to ask a couple of the questions again, just so we can answer them live, as after the recording, the Q&A cannot be seen. So I'll just have a look at some of the ones I think would be popular. So this one here, Ian, within Spanish degrees, can you do a year abroad in South America?
Yes, as Alex knows, the opportunities here are very broad, and South America and Latin America more generally is an increasingly popular option for those taking Spanish and wishing to spend their year abroad in a Spanish-speaking country. So we've had students spend their year in Peru, Argentina, Cuba several times. Alex sadly had her year abroad aborted by the pandemic in Cuba, but also other South American countries, Chile certainly. More generally, for those not just interested in Spanish, but we are not as Eurocentrically focused as we might once have been in relation to our European languages. So we have in French had people spend time in Senegal and French-speaking Africa. And certainly I think we've had people in Brazil with Portuguese. So generally we acknowledge, and this is increasingly a central part of the degree, that European languages also exist outside Europe in diaspora. That is reflected in our teaching content, so that we're not a Eurocentric degree, and also in the opportunities people are given. So you can even, of course, if you wish, if you're studying French, you could spend time in Montreal in North America. That's an interesting variant of French to pick up. The degree is very open in that regard.
Brilliant, thank you. What proportion of the interview is in your chosen language, Ian?
I would say, the interviews are between 20 and 25 minutes, and it's really only the beginning of the interview which is in the language. And as I said earlier, that involves reading out a text and answering questions on that text. So probably no more than 5 minutes, but if someone is really enjoying that aspect, then we can carry on in the language. It won't necessarily mean much in terms of the success or otherwise of their application, but we will be talking about a passage in the language, and then usually before we finish discussing that passage, we we go back into English to see if people have got any thoughts about the text they're looking at, which they would prefer to express in English. And, you know, I can't iterate enough that in the long run, the degree is not simply about being fluent in a language. It is, of course, about that, and you can expect to be fluent in the languages you study, but it's also about, it's an intellectually driven humanities academic degree. And so we're looking to see what people can do at the interview stage, not just in terms of how they can manipulate the language, but how they can think when they're not bound by where their French or their German or their Spanish is at that particular stage.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a question here that's come in. Alongside language A-levels, which ones would be the most useful in preparing for MML? Ian, back to you.
Well, that's an interesting question because in fact, we admit people with a very wide variety of A-levels or IB sort of focused interests. And so one might assume that if you're applying to do a language, you would have one or two languages and something like, say, English or history, or another sort of cognate humanities degree, which is essay-based. But in fact, all the time, we're sometimes admitting people who have a combined interest with language and mathematics or science. And really, the combinations of A-level you have aren't going to prejudice your application either way. We have admitted people with just one language who are doing sort of non-humanities subjects, and they do very, very well. Or people with two languages plus something else. There's no standard answer to that. So I think the real issue is that you should know that we're very broad and plural with the A-levels we might expect. The requirement is that you do have one language that is A-level or equivalent, unless you're doing the joint degree in history, in which case you combine the history side of the degree with either an A-level or an ab initio language. So if in doubt, you can write to us and we can make individual comments and give advice based on your profile. And particularly if you haven't started your A-levels yet and you're worried about what you should choose, we're always happy to give advice. But whatever your A-levels are, the key thing we'll be looking at is your potential for the degree. And learning languages is in many ways akin to sort of mathematical structure. So some of the best linguists are also good mathematicians, surprisingly perhaps. And so I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Another one here, if you're doing a language ab initio, how much of your personal statement should you devote to this language?
So obviously, if you're doing an ab initio language, we don't expect you to have language ability. Nevertheless, you will have an interview devoted to that ab initio language. And we do expect you to have demonstrated a very, very strong commitment and interest in that language that you're hoping to learn. So this might involve reading books that were originally written in the language in translation. And if you've done that, you should feel free to mention those on your personal statement. It might be your interest in politics and current affairs in that language, or in cinema. Cinemas or films are always available with subtitles. So there are all sorts of things that you can have access to without yet knowing the language itself, which can demonstrate that you actually have an interest. We probably, we really do want to see an interest above and beyond, oh, I went there and I had a great holiday and thought it might be nice to learn the language. You need to demonstrate a significant evidence that you really committed to this. So certainly reading texts, literary or non-literary texts, in translation is something that you should be encouraged to do and to mention, or watch films or follow news and current affairs and politics and mention it, and you will be asked about it. And it will give you then the chance to talk about what your interest really is.
Brilliant, thank you. We are unfortunately running out of time, so I think we will leave the questions there. If we didn't get round to your question, I apologise, and please do email me and I'll make sure I pass your question on to the relevant speaker and we'll get an answer back to you. When you leave the webinar this evening, it's going to redirect you to a feedback form. Please give us some feedback, let us know how you found the webinar. But to end the session, it'd be great to hear from each of the speakers. Just a final piece of advice for students who are still a little bit unsure about whether they should apply to Cambridge. So we'll go in the order that you presented.
So, I mean, I just really want to, my advice would be just to resonate what Alex was saying right at the end, is really think about the course that you're applying for and sort of ask yourself, what is it that you're really interested in learning about higher education? There's lots of opportunities at the university to explore your interests. So research the topic, think about, are you interested in sort of a European language? Are you interested in an Asian language, for example? Are you interested in linguistics, for example? So have a look at all those options and really research your subject area.
I was just answering on the chat there. The last thing I would want to emphasize really is just how we welcome people with all combinations of languages, whatever languages you are interested in. Please don't feel that, you know, somehow I'm in the French section. This does not mean in any way that we welcome applicants doing French more than any other language. So whatever the combinations, we welcome applications. We don't give any priority to people who are already doing 2 A-level languages. We welcome those who are combining a language with a beginner's language equally. And of course, we want everyone to feel comfortable and confident in applying to do MML at Downing and Cambridge widely, but Downing in particular, whatever your background and whatever your interests. And you should be sure that whatever your strengths are, they will be offset, as it is for everyone, with things that are less strong. We take all these together in the round and we balance things out and we do our best to be fair to every candidate. So, and I hope that once people are here, that openness that we try to show at admissions in welcoming applications is also shown in the teaching culture we have, which is friendly and supportive. And you should know that your interests will always be put first and that we want you to get the best degree possible that you can. So I just want to sort of emphasize what is generally absolutely the case across the subject areas in Downing, that we are an open and inclusive community.
And I think I would just add to what's been said by just saying, from my point of view as a student, when you go into the admissions process and you're looking at you're jumping through lots of hoops, right? You know, be it writing the personal statement, being invited to interview, coming up for the interview. Go into it with a really positive attitude if you can, and just remember that no one's trying to trip you up or kind of catch you out. Just show your enthusiasm. If you really want to study languages and you're committed to doing it for 3 to 4 years at degree level, really let it show, and don't be afraid of showing that passion. And remember that the people that you're speaking to, they are just as passionate as you about those languages, and people really are very friendly, even though there's a lot of formalities of the Cambridge application process. Try not to focus too much on that, and just think, these people they're going to be friendly, they're going to want to have great chats with you about the languages, and try not to get scared by the formalities, and just enjoy the experience at every stage.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much to Cam, to Ian and to Alex for your presentations and for your time this afternoon. It's been very much appreciated. And thank you to you at home as well for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye. Thanks for watching.